Hi, this is Mark Setti, the marketing manager for James Hardie Building Products. I want to say thank you to everybody for joining us today. This is our second presentation in the new James Hardie Business Growth webinar series. We are going to record the presentation today, and it will be made available to you through the winwithhardie.com website in the next week or so. If you're a member of the Associate Contractor program, you can access this presentation from your dashboard on hardiepro.com. After completing the short quiz, if you're a member of our Associate Contractor program, you can earn points in the Hardie Rewards program. So today's presentation is called How to Grow Your Business One Block at a Time, and it's really designed for a smaller replacement contractor that hasn't spent much time on the marketing and lead generation side of their business. However, the fundamentals of what we're going to be talking about today apply to all contractors, no matter the size of their business. As this series of webinars continues, you'll notice that the topics will get more in-depth and sophisticated. The presentation shouldn't last any more than about 45 minutes, and we'll reserve some time at the end for some questions and answers. However, please feel free to raise your hand or type a question in the chat box at any time as they come up. It's always helpful to be on the same page with regards to definitions and common marketing terms, so we're going to kick things off today reviewing a few common terms and definitions. I'd also like to review the importance of tracking your performance and give you some examples of what a typical marketing pro forma looks like. We'll also spend some time reviewing a few radius marketing tactics. This should be a refresher for most of you, but very important activities nonetheless. And finally, we'll do a brief recap and answer some questions and go from there. All right, so let's get started here. So I don't know if any of you have found yourselves in the same situation, but I've heard this a number of times. I know half of my marketing works, I'm just not sure which half. So what we want to accomplish today is to establish some clear goals and metrics that will help you develop and execute a systematic radius marketing campaign within targeted neighborhoods. Okay, so furthermore, we want to actually build upon successful projects by conducting cost-effective, high-impact marketing and referral prospecting with the goal of booking new appointments and ultimately selling new jobs. So let's get some easy stuff out of the way. Here is how I define some of the basic terms you'll hear in this presentation. You may have slightly different definitions, especially when it comes to what a lead is or what a sit is, and that's fine. I just want to make sure that with respect to the content in these slides that we're all on the same page. All right, so I refer to a lead as any inquiry or referral about an individual or organization that is a potential customer. So it's not qualified. This is somebody who contacts you who is interested in resiting their home, but there's no qualification beyond that. All right, the lead source is where the lead originated from. So if they saw a direct mail piece or they saw the phone number on the side of your trucks, that would be the lead source. All right, I define a sit as a demonstration with all decision makers. This typically happens at the kitchen table, and the sit rate is the total number of executed appointments as a percentage of total leads collected. So a general industry benchmark for sit rate would be anything better than 70%. So if you collect 10 leads, you should aim to have a kitchen table sit with at least 7 of them. All right, the close rate, this is the total number of sold jobs as a percentage of total sits. So if you sit with 10 customers and you close 4 of them, your close rate would be 40%. And finally, rehash. This is the act of recontacting dormant leads that do not close to generate a new appointment and a potential sale. All right, so I'd like to actually review what I call a marketing pro forma. This would be an example business structure of a replacement contractor. And I think it's very important before we get into any of the tactics around how we want to generate leads through radius marketing that the first step really is to have a clear plan of attack with respect to what your overall marketing budget is going to be, how much your leads should cost, how much your appointments should cost, so that you know how much you should be spending on your marketing. All right, so your business may look a little bit different. These are obviously averages, but generally speaking, the percentages that we're going to talk about are pretty common in our industry of home improvement. So this would be a contractor doing $750,000 in sales. They're typically going to spend about 5% of their overall revenue on marketing. So you can see that there. And we're going to use a $15,000 average sale for the purposes of this demonstration. All right, so if their average sale is $15,000 and they sell $750,000 total, they're going to have to do 50 jobs. All right, because they're a smaller contractor, not spending a whole lot of money on marketing and generating leads, most of their leads are going to come from referrals. So I'm going to say conservatively maybe 40% of their jobs sold will come from referrals. So that gets us to 20, and that means the other 30 jobs would be from non-referrals. I'm going to use a 35% close rate. It may be higher than that, but that's what I'm going to use for this demonstration. And so, if we're going to get to 50 jobs and we're only closing 35% of the appointments that we get into, we actually need 144 appointments. Okay, but we're not necessarily going to get a qualified appointment with all of the leads that come in the door. And so we actually need 180 leads. And what I'm saying here is that of the 180 leads you would collect, roughly 80% of them will turn into a kitchen table sit, which gets you to 144 appointments. You close 35% of those, that gets you to 50 jobs. All right, so now that we have this information, we're able to determine what our overall lead costs are. In this particular example, I've got a $208 lead cost and a $260 cost per sit. Okay, a couple of special notes here. Because of the size of the marketing budget, only being about $37,000 for the year, it's very important that this type of contractor focus around the 4 R's. So this would be radius, referral, rehash, and repeat marketing. All right, much of what we're going to talk about here a little bit later in the presentation. Okay, so the key here is leveraging the job site and working the customers hard for referrals. And since the majority of leads are coming from referrals and repeat marketing, close rates tend to be a little bit higher. All right, one more example. This would be a contractor doing $1.5 million in sales. I'm keeping the same percentage of marketing spend, about 5%, but you can see there that their overall marketing budget goes up to about $105,000, and I'm keeping the same average sale, $15,000. All right, so $1.5 million in revenue. We've got to sell 100 jobs. Our close rate has to be 33% or better, which means we need 303 appointments. And then if we're only sitting about 80% of the leads that we get, we're going to need 379 leads. Cost per lead now becomes $277, and our cost per sit is $346. All right, so even though this contractor is spending a bit more on marketing than the first example, we cannot lose sight of our job site marketing because it will help keep lead costs manageable. All right, things like radius marketing, knocking on doors, yard signs, truck graphics, door hangers, these things are relatively inexpensive in the grand scheme of advertising. And so while you may start to do some of those other things, radio advertising, internet marketing, your radius marketing is going to help keep those lead costs low. All right, so the major focus is still going to revolve around the job site. Now, let's talk a little bit about tracking performance. This is absolutely critical. If we think back to the quote a few slides ago, you don't want to be the person pulling your hair out over every dollar spent because of the uncertainty of what the return is going to be. Lead generation is very much a numbers game, and you have to keep track of the numbers. So I'm going to show you the most basic example of how you can track these metrics. All right, so here are a few things that you would want to track. Obviously, where are your leads coming from? How much are you spending on the various lead sources that you may employ, whether it be door hangers or direct mail or yard signs? So where are the leads coming from? Where are you spending your money? What is your overall cost per lead, and how does that differ depending upon the lead source? What's your close rate? What's your sit rate, etc., etc. So here's an example of a spreadsheet that I'll send to everybody after the presentation. This is an Excel file. It already has all of the formulas and calculations pre-built, so it's plug and play. All right, as you can see down at the bottom, I'm on the July 2011 tab, and the first place really here to start is in column A, And what you want to do is you want to plug in all of the areas that you're spending money. Okay, so at a high level, I've got, as an example, radio, TV, pay-per-click, my website, ServiceMagic, and a few others. Okay, you could even take this one step further, and if you were advertising in multiple places on the radio, you might have your 2 or 3 different radio stations itemized out. Okay, so the next step really is to obviously keep track of how many leads are coming in. And so I would suspect that most people on the phone, at minimum, are asking their customers, how did you hear about me? And that's good. All right, the more that you can do to track that, whether it's through analytics on the internet or a unique tracking phone number that you put on your direct mail or yard signs, the better. So as those leads are coming in, you're updating this spreadsheet daily and plugging in basically how many leads are coming from each of the different lead sources, which will then ultimately populate your year-to-date lead numbers. Okay, the next step here is to go ahead and put in how much you're spending on each lead source. And so as an example, if we spent $2,500 during the month of July on radio, I'd plug in $2,500 there, and you would notice that column E, my year-to-date spend, went from $20,000 to $22,500. All right, the next step is to plug in when you actually schedule appointments for that particular lead source. So a lead comes in, you put the lead here, you scroll over, you book the appointment, you put a 1 there. All right, this will pre-populate how many appointments you've scheduled year to date, but more importantly, it's actually going to populate your sit rate. And this is basically, once again, the percentage of the leads that you collect that end up turning into appointments. So it's very helpful to understand how that might differ between lead sources. All right, we have a column here for sales month to date, so you would plug in whether or not you sold a job from that particular lead source, what the revenue of that job was, and then it's going to spit out what your annual return on investment would be. All right, so this is really, really important at the end of each month or the end of each quarter or the end of each year to be able to go over and actually take a look at what your lead source was, how many leads you generated, how many appointments you were able to schedule, and most importantly then, whether or not it returned a positive return on investment. Okay, so here's a diagram that's going to lead us into the next topic of radius marketing. Today we're focused on the inner circle. This is job site radius marketing. As the business grows, you don't want to lose sight of those fundamentals, but you're spending a little more money and increasing your reach. All right, when the company gets to a certain size and you have the marketing budget set aside to begin building your brand beyond the job site radius, you'll start spending more in areas that will allow you to reach more people. This might include a larger spend on the internet, investing in some radio or TV advertising, and getting more involved in the community. All right, but let's focus on this inner circle, this radius marketing circle. All right, so some basic blocking and tackling can help you own a neighborhood. As time can be an issue for anyone, it's absolutely critical that you establish some repeatable systems which will lead to positive results. All right, so the first thing really is signage around a job site. You want to make sure that you have enough job site signs that you can put a sign out in front of each of your jobs for at least 30 days. Okay, this is sort of a no-brainer. I would expect most people on the phone to already have job site signs, but the best practice I want to share is actually having a flyer attached to the job site sign. All right, real estate agents do this all the time. There's no reason why contractors shouldn't be doing the same thing. And what it allows you to do is to share your message and your story with the neighbors in the community beyond what you'd be able to shove into a 24 by 24 yard sign with a phone number on it. Okay, a lot of people are going to be very interested to find out what's going on with the job. It's a massive transformation. It's going to gain a lot of attention in the neighborhood. So having a flyer there that they can swing by and pick up with your company story and your neighborhood discount could be the thing you need to get them to pick up the phone and give you a call. All right, I have seen some contractors use dumpster signage as well. I think this is a great way to brand some of the less sightly things that might be on the job site. You can generally purchase a 3x10 vinyl banner for maybe $40 or $50. They typically come with grommets on the corners that you can tie some rope through and hang it on your dumpster. All right, the other idea here is around canvassing. All right, so when you sell a job, where do you canvass and how often? Now, this is a bit different than having your canvassing crew sort of go out day in and day out. This would be more your sales rep or your project manager who are knocking on, let's say, the nearest 20 to 25 doors around a job site, either that they've just done an in-home consultation with at the front end, or when the job actually begins, or when the job ends. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here momentarily. If you knock on the door and nobody's there, it's always best practice to have a flyer or a door hanger to put there, let them know that you've been by the house. All right, so additional direct marketing. So this is really where it can become pretty impactful for your business to put some repeatable systems in place. If you don't have the time, or if you don't have the resources to be generating marketing mailings every time you do a job site, every time you sell a job, then there are some really easy things that you can set up with a local printer to make this a pretty turnkey process. All right, so the best practices would say that you want to have at least 3 to 4 touches over the 3 to 4 week period that the job is going on, sort of start to finish, from when you sell it to when the final punch list is completed. All right, I like to split it up between a couple of postcards and then either a door hanger or a letter, just to switch things up a little bit. And we're typically mailing out anywhere from 50 to 200 pieces 3 to 4 times. All right, so what you can do is you can spend a little bit more time on the front end creating these templates so that you have sort of a before, during, and after template already created. And then either work with James Hardie and our Marketing Zone website, or you can actually work with a local printer if you choose to, and just go ahead and set some parameters. If you know that you want to send out 50 pieces 3 different times around a job site, and you've already got your creative templates developed, then all you really should have to do is set up that process with your print vendor, and just when you sell a job, pop them a quick email, say, hey, here's the job site, I just sold this today, and I'd like my direct marketing campaign going out starting on Monday. And they would already know that you've got 3 or 4 pieces that you want it going out to 50 homes, and that you like them to go out, let's say, every other Tuesday. All right. Another best practice would be to have open house or neighborhood events. All right. So the first webinar in our business growth webinar series was on neighborhood events, and we do have a recording of that presentation, which is also going to be made available on our Win with Hardie website. And so that's a much more thorough description than I'm going to give you today, but it's essentially what you would do at the end of a job outside the home of a beautiful before and after transformation to capture the interest of the neighborhood and generate some additional leads. All right, there's a couple of different types of events that you can do. You typically like to have some sort of hook where you're inviting people outside of their homes for some free ice cream or free barbecue and to see the Joneses' new before and after reside. All right, and then the next piece is just broader community events. All right, so where can you go where other people in the neighborhood are going to be going in large quantities? So these would be things like balloon festivals, art festivals, wine and cheese events. And typically you can either go through a homeowner association, even if they have a website, a lot of times they'll have a calendar of events posted, or you can go to the Chamber of Commerce. And there are plenty of these types of events, especially in the summertime, that you can tap into. And for a relatively small investment, maybe $300 to $500, you can potentially get in front of a few thousand people. And all you're really trying to do is intercept traffic, shake some hands, and generate some leads. All right, the next piece is around referral prospecting. So for many of you, I'm sure referrals come quite naturally, especially the longer that you've been in the business and the more sort of good testimonials you have. But with a little effort, you can definitely multiply your referral rates and grow your business exponentially. So let's talk about a couple of ways for how you can do that. One of which is setting the stage up front during your first appointment. All right, our goal is 100% customer satisfaction so that you feel 100% comfortable referring our business, and we're going to ask you for a referral at the end of the job. All right, you can't forget to ask for the referral. Most people aren't going to be sitting around thinking about who they can refer you to each day. Okay, so when you do ask for the referral, it's really important to help them narrow down who might be a good fit for your business. All right, the obvious is neighbors. And so you might approach that by asking if anybody has stopped by the house or picked up a flyer out of the yard sign or asked any questions, and then you can happily follow up and offer them some sort of free in-home consultation and a neighborhood discount. All right, another option would be coworkers. All right, in a best practice, if you do some sort of appreciation at the end of a job, I know a lot of contractors send out thank you cards or before and after pictures that are framed. I've talked to contractors who have sent fruit baskets, and the best practice there is to actually send it to their place of business rather than their home, because if you think about it, a re-site is a lot like buying a new car. There's this euphoria that you feel and you want to show it off, and you've got a lot of pride in your home ownership. And so by sending a nice can of cookies or a fruit basket to their place of business along with a before and after picture, it helps definitely spark the conversation and interest amongst their coworkers, and it could lead to some great referrals for your business. All right, and the last way is just make sure you have some sort of incentive or offer. It doesn't always have to be financial, but cash typically is the number one preference. And so a lot of contractors would actually offer a cash incentive for a booked appointment, which is very valuable to you as well. If you consider that most booked appointments might cost anywhere from between $250 and maybe $400. So if you can get a booked appointment for $50, that's a win. And then if that appointment ends up turning into a sale, then you offer an additional bonus for the homeowner. Maybe it's $250 as well. All right, then the last piece is around customer satisfaction. This ties right into the the referral piece as well. So one example of a third party that does satisfaction surveying is Guild Quality. This happens to be a company that James Hardie has partnered up with, and so if you're a member of one of our preferred remodeler programs, you actually get Guild Quality as a part of that program. And essentially what they do is they will send satisfaction surveys out to all of your sold jobs, but if you like, they'll also send them out to unsold jobs. And what it helps you do is analyze performance trends, view performance by project manager or crew or salesperson, and you can even use this as a differentiator on sales call by sharing the performance that Guild Quality provides for your business relative to job site safety, workmanship, professionalism, overall knowledge, and overall customer satisfaction. So regardless of whether you use Guild Quality or not, I would highly recommend having some sort of satisfaction surveying process set up, and I'll give you an example of why. So we manage a small contracting business in Denver, and we had recently completed James Hardie Reside, and the homeowners were super thrilled with the way the home looked. The process went great from start to finish. We picked up all of our stuff, did the final punch list, and we were on our way. And within 24 hours, they had received their Guild Quality Satisfaction Survey, at which point they filled it out, and we received it instantaneously. And on that, they had explained how happy they were, but they also mentioned that their dog had gone outside and stepped on a nail. And then they had to take the dog to the vet, and it ended up costing them about $350. All right, so we got this feedback from them almost instantaneously, and we were able to head over to the home, apologize, cut them a check for the vet bills, and bring them a gift card and some flowers, which immediately helped remedy the situation. And it's not necessarily going to keep them from talking about that experience in the future. They'll probably still mention to their friends or family that their dog stepped on a nail, but in this particular case, instead of making that a negative, we've helped turn it into a positive. It's not uncommon for little things like that to happen. It's unfortunate, but when they do, you want to make sure your customers have a high level of comfort knowing that you're going to take care of the situation. All right, so if we hadn't had Guild Quality, it's unlikely that we would have ever heard about that particular situation. So very important. All right, now who else can help you? All right, a little networking never hurt anybody. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but you can certainly reach out to the local homeowners associations. A lot of times they'll have community newsletters, or you might be able to sponsor different events that they may have. So that's always important. Who knows? You might even be able to become a recommended service provider in that community, which could do a lot of things for your business. All right, real estate agents. These can be some of the most influential people just before or after a sale. The majority of money that's spent on home improvement is spent within the first couple of months of buying a new home. And so it's very important that you do what you can to reach out and network with realtors, because they can certainly influence a homeowner's decision around siding. And then finally, insurance agents and home inspectors. These are also influencers around the home. And so if you've got some connections in those segments of the business as well, it certainly isn't going to hurt. Okay, and finally, getting your business right on the internet. The next business growth webinar series that is coming up on September 17th is going to be focused all around the internet. We're going to go through 6 best practices for making the internet work for your business. All right, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it today, but essentially what's happened is economic uncertainty coupled with the size of a reside project and the access to information via the internet combined together gives you a more educated and conservative buyer. And so the first place that they're going to do their research is on the internet. The decision-making process is typically anywhere from 9 to 12 months on new siting, and they're probably not, the lead is probably not contacting you until maybe the last 30 or 45 days. And so the first 6 or 7 months are spent on the internet, gathering information, selecting products, selecting colors, getting referrals, driving around neighborhoods and seeing the product on homes. All right, so it's very important that you do what you can on the internet to promote your business. All right, so we'll talk about some best practices on September 17th in our next webinar. I would highly encourage everybody to attend that seminar. It should be a pretty good one. All right, so in summary, keep things simple, be repetitive, don't get away from your radius marketing. All of the things that we talked about today can be implemented in a process and a system, and they should be happening every single job that you sell. You sell a job, you want to canvass the nearest 20 to 25 homes. You want to put a job site sign out there with a flyer. You want to initiate your radius marketing. You want to follow it up if it's the right neighborhood and the right good looking before and after transformation with a neighborhood event. As other events become available in the area, you certainly want to be doing what you can to promote yourself and getting in front of some people through those types of events. It certainly doesn't hurt to keep the HOA informed of the good work that you've done in that neighborhood by sending them a nice letter, a testimonial from your homeowner, and maybe a before and after picture. And then obviously, we're going to talk a little bit more about the internet next time, but you want to definitely do what you can to make sure that you've got a great website that's not only helping you capture leads organically, but everything else that you do as a business should be funneling people through that website. Because that's certainly where they're going to get their research. All right. Thank you for attending the webinar today. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. And once again, you can register for all of the remaining business growth webinars on winwithhardie.com. The next one is around internet marketing, and it's on September 17th. Thank you very much.